Thank you so much, Janet, and that was very kind of you. My name is Risa M. I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date is March 3rd, 2004, and my home group is the Primary Purpose Group of Webster, New York. We meet on Zoom on Sundays at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We study the Big Book line by line, and it's a little different from other groups, other Big Book studies. We like to study what the founders are saying to us so that we can better learn, practice, and teach this beautiful message and the exact directions that are outlined in the book. And I'm already tearing up. Half of the day was spent thinking about, what am I going to talk about? How am I going to sound good? How are you guys going to like me? All of those things. And, Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me, that before I go speak and give my lead at a meeting, that I go and I get quiet with God. And I did that. And I got quiet with God for a good 15, 20 minutes and just ask that God speak through me. And through my prayers, I just remembered just how much God and Alcoholics Anonymous have done for me. And not just, being able to be, a person of service in Alcoholics Anonymous, but to be a person of service all throughout my life. And I'm tearing up because I remember what I was like when I first walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And as Janet said, I have a huge story of transformation over the years. And some of that transformation was not very good transformation. I started to stop doing what I had learned and stopped practicing what this program gave me. And I transformed backwards through the steps, and at 16 years sober, I had another first step experience. In meditation, though, there was something that kept coming to me over and over again, and it was a quote in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I'm going to read that, and I'm going to start off with that before I start to share my story. It says on page 124, the family afterward, cling to the thought that in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession you have, the key to life and happiness for others. With it, you can avert death and misery for them. And, I sat, all day long trying to think of what I'm going to say. And really all I have to give is my story. I have my dark past. I have my mistakes. I have all the times that I've shown up as an imperfect human in this program, and God has carried me through it. And today I do have a message of depth and weight. There were times where I would come and I would speak at meetings, or I would talk at them, and I'd walk away from them knowing that I wasn't doing the things that I was saying to other people. But today I have a message of depth and weight. And, last night I did a nightly inventory, and this morning I woke up and I did some prayer and meditation, and I took that nightly inventory into my morning, and I looked at how I could do my day better than the day before. And I tried to practice that all day today. And that's what a daily reprieve looks like to me. When I first walked into Alcoholics Anonymous, I was absolutely miserable. I was a mess. I was angry. I was lonely. I was tired. I was a shell of a person. I didn't know if alcohol was my problem, or, I definitely felt like it was my solution. I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous and I went to meetings, and I remember sitting around thinking, I wanted what you guys had, but I didn't know if I had the problem you guys had. And if I didn't have the problem you had, then would what you did work for me? Eventually, after many months of trial and error and going back out and trying again, I finally sat and did what some of you told me to do, which was, to get a sponsor who was into the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I sat down with that sponsor, and after months of sitting in AA and not really knowing what alcoholism was, and knowing if I had it, that sponsor spoon-fed me the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had one sponsor once, and she said, if you're not an alcoholic, don't waste my time. And I didn't know if I was an alcoholic or not. I knew that when I walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was 23 years old, and I went to a lot of meetings where people there were at least double my age, if not triple. I knew they would say things to me like, I've spilled more on my shirt than you've ever put into your body. They said things to me like, you might not be homeless now, or you might not go to jail now, or you might not have had these things done now, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Those are not yets. And what I can tell you is none of those things make me an alcoholic. Just because I don't have the consequences that they had, just because I might not have drank in as much as they did or for as long as they drank, doesn't mean that I'm not an alcoholic. But I was very confused as to what an alcoholic was. And so she sat down and we read into the big book, and she started to tell me through the doctor's opinion that what I had was an allergy. She talks about how when I put alcohol in my body, something reacted differently in my body that didn't happen in a regular person. And I remember thinking, I'm allergic to penicillin. When I take penicillin in my body, I get a rash, I get hives. I don't want more of it, I want less. What are you talking about? And she had me look up words all the time, and one of the words she had me look up was allergy. And I can tell you that the definition for allergy when the big book was first written is an abnormal reaction to a substance. That's all it means. Considering that there is really only 10% of our population that is doomed with this alcoholic disease, with this allergy, 10% out of 100 is an abnormal reaction. So what happens to me when I put alcohol in my body is I want more. I go out towards the end of my drinking. Early on in my drinking, I enjoyed it. I picked it up and it made me fun, and I wanted to go out and I wanted to get drunk. I was young, I was fun, and eventually, life started to suck the more I drank. And what would happen is I would start doing these things that I had promised myself that I wasn't going to do. In We Agnostics, it talks about if a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. I made promises to myself when I would drink. I'm never going to drink alone. I'm never going to drink before work. I'm never going to drink at work. But slowly but surely, those things started to go away. Those conditions that I put on, myself and my drinking started to get smaller and smaller. And as I drank, my life got worse and worse. My relationships with people went away. My loneliness increased. My hatred of myself increased. The ever-growing void inside of me started to get bigger and bigger. And I remember starting to think, when I drink, things happen to me. It talks about incomprehensible demoralization. And I remember I would go out and I would just have one or two. I just wanted to go out with my girlfriends. And I was like, all right, I'm not going to drink like I always do. I'm only going to have one or two. That's all I'm going to do. And by the end of the night, actually, the next morning at 6 a.m. in the morning, I would be walking up my driveway again with this incomprehensible demoralization. I started to hate myself. I couldn't look in the mirror because I knew I did things when I was drinking that I was not proud of. But for some reason, even when I would go out for one or two, I ended up absolutely wasted. And I didn't understand that the craving that the doctor's opinion talks about really looks like in my drinking like I changed my mind. I'm out there and I'm drinking and I'm having two or three and all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? I can handle 4 or 5. That was the allergy cropping up in me. When I started to do alcoholic math to figure out how I could keep drinking, but also still get to the place I promised I was going to get to, that was the allergy cropping up inside of me. The alcohol just took over my body when I put it in. And this part I could understand. I could understand that when I drink, there are problems. I got that. What I didn't understand was the second part of alcoholism, that I had a mental obsession. More about alcoholism. It talks that the idea that somehow, someday he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. Before that, it says, no person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Now, this was a piece of alcoholism I didn't understand. I could get the idea that if I drink, I'm in trouble. I got the idea that it's not the first, or it's not the last one that hurts me, it's the first one. I got the idea that I needed to put the plug in the jug. But what I couldn't understand was that my mind popped that plug right out almost every single time. What I didn't understand is that I have absolutely no choice whether I pick up that drink or not. I'm going to fast forward a little bit to 16 years sober because I had a first step experience with that sponsor. I had a first step experience where I finally realized how screwed I was when it came to alcohol. I realized that when I put alcohol in my body, I can't stop. And I realized that my mind could not keep me from it. And I worked the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous with a vigor. And by 7 months sober, I was sponsoring other people. And I was taking them through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous out of the big book. Slowly over the years, what happened was I started to believe that the only thing I needed was knowledge of the big book. What I started to believe was that all I needed to do was study it. I knew people said this 12-step program is not something that you graduate from. I knew people, they said it screaming in meetings. I heard it over and over again. I heard action, but I didn't really hear any of that. I heard it in my ears, but I never heard it in my heart. And I thought I was doing Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought I was going to meetings. I was the GSR. I had service positions inside my home group, outside my home group. I knew the traditions. I had studied the traditions. I was learning the concepts. I was doing all of that. And I thought I was doing Alcoholics Anonymous perfectly. And I was cocky. I was so cocky. And I was so prideful. I would get new sponsors to grow spiritually. And I'd look at them and say, I know the big book better than you do. I don't know what you're going to be able to teach me. And what I realize now, what I found out around 16 and a half years sober, was that I had gotten to a point where I thought that I had some power over this disease. I thought that the amount of time that I had sober was going to keep me sober. I thought the fact that I knew the big book inside and out was going to keep me sober. I stopped practicing. I don't know if I ever actually fully practiced the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Sure, I would, pick up pen to paper and I would call it a 10th step or another 4th step or whatever you might have it. But it was usually when my back was up against the wall. And I used to question, I didn't know, I thought I was a special alcoholic because I would go on these roller coaster rides of emotion and spirituality. I would go up and I would fall against hit a wall in sobriety, and I would do some spiritual activities, and those who know who've hit spiritual walls know that when we pick up the tools of Alcoholics Anonymous, we are going to be feeling a lot better. God works quick. God works quick. God works quicker than anything that I do in self-reliance. And yet it is always the last thing I do. You know, and so what happened was I'd hit a wall, and I would go and I would do these spiritual principles, and the next thing I know is I'm on top of a spiritual hilltop, and I was so excited, and I almost came to live to have bad moments so I could be on top of spiritual hilltops again. It was almost like I became addicted to having those moments. What I've learned today is that spirituality is in the Tuesday afternoons. And what I mean by that is, you know, I used to live for the excitement of Fridays and Saturday nights. Tuesday afternoon, that's boring. You know, that's coming home after work and putting your feet up and you know, maybe watching some TV or having dinner with your family. That's boring. I want to go out. I want the lights. I want the city. I want the excitement. I want the chaos. I want the crazy. But true sobriety in my life is Tuesday afternoon. It's not being all excited all the time. It's being calm. It's being able to live my life calmly and neutrally. I have positives, I have negatives. But I'm you know, our book talks about in the 11th step promises, and these ones used to be my favorite. I'm not sure which are my favorite anymore. But it says, as we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. We constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, "Thy will be done." We are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. We become much more efficient. We do not tire so easily. We are not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. It works. It really does. So when I'm in those excitement moments, when I'm in that crazy, wonderful feeling of a spiritual high, and when I'm in those moments of a very, very, very spiritual low, that's when I forget God. That's when I forget God. And when I forget God, I think about a drink. So I stopped doing the practices of this program. And I actually started to come to think that 10 and 11 were just optional anyway. I would go to meetings and people would say, well, you know, I don't really do these very often. And I started to believe for myself that those were kind of optional. I could do them when and where, you know, how I wanted to. I didn't need to do them constantly. And I didn't do that. And, you know, what I found is as I continued to live my life and as I continued to sponsor others, you know, because during this whole time, as I'm getting sicker and sicker, I'm still trying to give away what I don't have. The big book says on 164, we cannot transmit something we haven't got. I had nothing. I didn't pray. I didn't meditate. You know, my prayers and meditations were me talking to myself in my head, telling myself my plans, my ideas, my motives, thinking that I was talking, that was God. And so what happened at 16 years sober as I'm going through this time period is COVID hit. My sobriety is March 3rd, 2004. On my 16th anniversary, the world shut down. And at that point, I was already thinking about a drink. I was already thinking, I had gotten to a point, I was 16 years sober, I had a house, I have a sober husband, I have 2 beautiful children, I had gone to school, I had a career, I had everything that my little young 10-year-old self thought was the most important things to have. I had the outside looked exactly like it was supposed to look. However, I couldn't stand my husband. I wish to God that I had made other decisions and not had children. I wanted to run away from my whole entire family. I was stealing time from my job. I was stealing time from everybody. I was stealing joy and emotional security from everybody in my life. I was talking about God and meditation at meetings all the time. And honestly, the only thing I was doing for my sobriety was going to meetings, being absolutely miserable, hating those of you who are grateful, and trying to give this thing away that I didn't have. And so when the world shut down and I didn't have meetings to actually go to, I was home in my house all by myself with these two children because my husband he had to go off to work. And I looked at myself. I remember being up in my room one day and I remember thinking, if my answer is God, I'm screwed. Because I had absolutely no relationship with that God. None. And so, I would go out to the grocery store or wherever, and, we all had hand sanitizer in our cars at that time, and, the gloves and the masks and everything. And I remember going out to the grocery store, and I was sitting in the car one day, and I remember picking up that hand sanitizer and starting to bring it up to my nose, and I started to sniff it. And I remember, and this was a hand sanitizer that was made by one of our distilleries too. So it was strong stuff, I don't even know if you could qualify it as hand sanitizer and not just straight whiskey that you'd pour on your hands. But I remember I would smell it. And there was a few times where I would stick out my tongue, just testing to see if I would actually touch my tongue to the bottle. And I remember picking up the phone and calling a friend and absolutely terrified myself and crying. And she said, all right, let's take the hand sanitizer out of your car and put soap and water in a warm dish, and that you can drive around with that. However, I'm sitting there 16 years sober, trying to protect myself from alcohol. I had gotten to a place when I worked the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous where I was free. I didn't have to hide myself from alcohol. I was able to go to concerts. I was able to go to bars. I was able to go everywhere and not think about alcohol. And here I am sitting, and I can't even have something to clean my hands in my car. I went home and I had my husband hide the isopropyl alcohol on me as well. I got to a point where I was so close to a drink, and the only thing between me and that drink was a higher power. I would go home and I would just sleep. Whenever my husband got home, I would say, goodbye, everybody. I'm out. And what I meant by I'm out is I'm out of life. I'm done. I didn't want to kill myself, but I didn't want to be here. And I would just go to sleep, and my husband was suffering, and he saw me suffering, and he's in Alcoholics Anonymous, and Zoom had started up, and he loves speaker meetings. He loves speakers. And he took this opportunity to start going to all these meetings that he had heard these speakers, their home groups and stuff like that. And he's like, I've always wanted to check them out. And so, he was checking those out while I was sleeping in my bed constantly. And I remember one afternoon, it was a Saturday afternoon, he came racing up the stairs while I was half asleep in the bed. He's like, Risa, you have to hear this woman. You have to hear her. You have to hear her, because he just heard me and her. And he made me listen to this woman, and she was talking about Alcoholics Anonymous. She was talking about the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. She was talking about God, and she was excited. And she was saying how she, at 15 or 14 years sober, I can't remember, how she had gotten to the place where I was right then and there. And see, the thing is I really, truly believe for me to be that excited about Alcoholics Anonymous, God, in this program, again, I would have to pick up a drink. I needed to have that new experience. And yet here she was, 30 years sober, at the same place I was at then, excited. That gave me hope. That gave me hope. I went to her home group, and it was a big book meeting, much like mine is now, and I started to listen, and I remember they were in the fourth step, something I had gone through a million times before with sponsees, and I remember they were talking about something, and I looked at my husband. I said, "What book are they? What book are they reading?" I've got this book in front of me, and I'm reading the words that they're reading, but they're talking about this stuff, and I don't understand it, and it's different than what I've ever heard before. And he looked at me. He's like, "Yeah, I know it's different. I've never heard it put like this before." And I remember thinking it was my most humbling moment ever, where I remember sitting there going, maybe, just maybe, I don't know everything about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Maybe, just maybe, I'm not all I'm not done. Maybe, just maybe, I just haven't been doing this the right way. I started going to that meeting, and more that I went to the meeting, the more and more I wanted what those people had. And I reached out to them, and I emailed them, and I said, I'm looking for a sponsor. And they gave me the name of two women and two numbers, and I called the first one and they didn't answer, and I called the second one, and I have to tell you, within 5 to 10 minutes, that woman knew my heart better than anybody else. And her story was amazing, because she was sitting there, she was talking to me, she had, she just celebrated 9 years, so she had 4 years sober. She had 4 years sober. I had 16. And I was willing to walk through a wall for this woman. She knew my heart. She had gone back out at 16 years sober. She had been where I had been. And she did what I had not done. And she told me about the 7 years that it took her to get back to Alcoholics Anonymous, and how she came to start working Alcoholics Anonymous in a different way. And I didn't look at her ever and say, I know the big book of alcoholics better than you. Ooh, I'm a little scared of even if I were to try to do that. Now, I love that woman, but she sat there and she said, I am not going to pet you. I am not going to make nice with you. I don't want to walk on your grave, so I don't mind walking on your feelings. And she was amazing. She took me through this book a way that I had never been taken through it before, and she took me through an inventory process that had me looking at my old ideas and the thoughts. It was a very in-depth inventory that took a look at my old ideas and my old premonitions about how life should be, how women should be, how wives should be, how sponsors should be, how everything in my life was all in my thinking. She helped show me that I was no longer a victim. She took me through the third step in a way that was absolutely incredible, because I thought my whole thought process on the third step was, one, it was something that you just did to get to the fourth step. And when it talked about selfishness and self-centeredness, I thought that it was only something that was when I was drinking or before I worked the steps. I didn't realize that was who I was on a daily basis. It was a daily basis. Today, I woke up, my first thoughts were about me. An hour later, after I asked God to remove that, my thoughts were still about me. I am selfish and self-centered to the core. All I ever seem to think I care about are my little ideas, my little thoughts, my little, motives. And that's why I need to regularly do step 10 and 11. That is why they are not optional. Because when all I'm thinking about is me, resentments, fear crop up, My conduct becomes nasty. I start treating you like a tool or an actor in the play of my life. I'm no longer loving. I'm no longer kind. I'm no longer tolerant. I'm going to be nice to you until you stop giving me what I want, and then I'm going to be mean and nasty. When I know that about myself, and I know that truly deep down in myself, and I go into the fourth step with that, it makes me a little sick. I feel sick to my stomach right now as I talk about it. And so I go into this fourth step, and you know, I see all of this stuff, and I see how I'm not a victim of circumstance. I'm not a victim of life. I'm a victim of myself. And I see that, and I share that with my sponsor. And as hard as it is, and as hard as it was to tell her some of the things, because it wasn't the actions I had done that were the worst things about me. What it was these deep, disgusting thoughts. I thought, you know, moms don't have these thoughts. Wives don't have these thoughts. People shouldn't have these thoughts. I'm a dirty person, like my dirty thoughts. And when I told these to my sponsor, she talked about sunlight coming down onto this mold and cleaning it away. By the end of my fifth step, we're laughing at the absolute ridiculousness of some of the things I've gotten myself into and some of the delusions I thought about myself. The sixth step was not hard for me at all. I did not need extra readings. I did not need extra commentary. I was disgusted. I was absolutely disgusted on the defects of character, this list that she gave me. I threw myself on my knees within that hour and asked God to remove them from me, root and branch, in the seventh step. I did my amends. I did more amends. I had made amends to my mom when I first got sober. And I needed to make amends to my mom at 16 and a half years sober because I was a jerk to her. I was finally free of a resentment that I had to my father for almost 43 years. My father and I have a great relationship today, and he has not changed a darn bit. But I have finally accepted that I love him regardless of who he is, and he loves me the best that he knows how to. I love my children today. I love my husband today. We just celebrated 15 years of continuous marriage. There are times where his chewing makes me think about divorce. There are times where he drives me nuts. It's okay though, because I have a 10th step that when that happens, I can go and I can ask God, please remove this from me. Help me to be helpful to my husband. Help me to be another partner in this relationship. Help me to give back to him. As I said, last night I did an 11th step inventory. It wasn't the prettiest. I had some resentments. I had some fears. I'm always selfish. That's usually a yes. You know, I saw that stupid little thing is I've become obsessed with audiobooks. And I've been walking around my house. I have these two children who love me and want to spend time with me. And I have this husband who loves me and wants to spend time with me. And I've been walking around the house with these big old clunky headphones on all day long. And they're like, mommy, mommy. And I move the headphone away and I just glare at them. And I'm like, what? I'm so angry that they're disrupting my piece of this book. And it came to me, and I put that down in my inventory last night. You know, I was unkind to my children. I was unloving to them because all I cared about was listening to my story. And it came to me this morning that the headphones can't be in the house. I can listen to my book in the car to the work. I can listen to my book on my lunch break. But the headphones don't need to be in the house. So right now the headphones are in the car. I ask God to guide me. I ask God to show me what to do. And I spend time not just in prayer, but in meditation. I need to be quiet. I need my brain to stop rattling along. Because if I don't, I can't hear that small, quiet voice of God. Here's the important part of all of it, though. I can pray and I can listen. But if I don't do, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to change. I need to trust. I need to have utmost faith and trust that God is going to take care of me no matter what. No matter what I ask, no matter what I pray, the answer will be there. It may not be there on the time that I want it to be. It may not be there in a minute or a few hours or even a few days or weeks. But it will be there. I need to put footwork behind that. My greatest blessing today is that I have women from all over the world calling me and talking to me about Alcoholics Anonymous. I have my sponsees who are absolutely beautiful women that I get to watch go from these trembling, just absolutely wrecks. I don't think they trust me that much when I say it. Just do the work, do the steps, do these directions. You can question anything that I ask you to do that's not in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. But just do what the book tells you, and I can promise you that you are going to have a new attitude towards your life, even when nothing in it has ever changed. My biggest, when I start to get text messages or phone calls from them a few days or weeks later, because remember, God works quickly. And they send me things like, I can't believe that I haven't thought about this thing all day long. I can't believe I was able to get through the day calm and peaceful. And not because of anything that I have done, but just that they have actually followed through with their own actions is one of the brightest spots in my day. I have very close friends, some of them are on here today, who I can go to, who I have given spiritual consent to, and who I have spiritual consent from. We are able to talk. My sponsor, I love her to absolute death, but she is not the person who keeps me sober. She is such a busy woman with her own full life. And she has encouraged and helped me to build a fellowship around me, the fellowship of the Spirit that I have craved for years and years and years of my sobriety. Whenever I am agitated or doubtful, I take a pause. I ask God for the right answer, the right decision. I have these women that I can reach out to, and I can be my dirty human self. And I can tell them what is going on in my head, and I can tell them all of the weird stuff and the thoughts, and they will love on me, and they will point me back into the direction of God and the spiritual path. This program is absolutely beautiful. I look back at the wreck that I was 21 years ago and the wreck that I really was 5 years ago. And I am so thankful today that I got to go through those experiences Because if I didn't get to go through those experiences, I wouldn't be able to help people, women like myself, today. Thank you so much, Janet, for asking me to talk. It was a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much.